So there are a number of theoretical models, but the important thing, I think, is to remind ourselves that how we understand things determines how we deal with them. There's a model for understanding and action that we use with our students in our teaching at the University of Bath. I think it's fair to say that students have a much better understanding of social injustice these days, but they do need help to seek ways of practicing that reflects that understanding, the actions that they can take, recognising the political nature of social work. We have lots of students committed to social justice, but very naive politically, and I think that they need that assistance within organisations to learn how to build that into their practice. I think this is a useful learning cycle, if you like. There's also this notion which I've generated some time ago, which again I think people tell me is a useful model of generic anti-racist practice. This is where good practice informed by anti-racist criteria is actually good for everyone. I'm not going to go into details about this because I think actually there's a, can you see that? There's from the disability field, there's a cartoon that actually says it much better. Could you please shuffle the ramp, says the boy in the wheelchair, and the janitor says, all these other kids are waiting to use the stairs. When I get through shoveling them off, then I'll clear the ramp for you. And he says, but if you shovel the ramp, you can all get in. So there's that, in a jokey sort of way, it kind of indicates that actually good practice for disabled people, good practice for, that deals with racism, actually is good practice for everybody. And then the other model, this is something that I've been used for a very long time, is Bandana Ahmed's book, Black Perspectives in Social Work. Very, very good book, very short book, but full of, amongst other things, lists of good practice. And one of the things that she does in talking about assessing black families, I've used this list in a slightly different way. So she asks, do you critically examine your views of black families? If we take the black out of that, then I think it's very, very helpfully allows us to critically evaluate our approach to families in general. And I can just go through some more examples. How do you avoid negative stereotypes of all families, any families? We have to tend to work on assumptions, and we must try and avoid those assumptions. How do you respond to service users' criticisms? How do you involve families in assessments? Does your assessment distinguish between families' problems and structural disadvantage? Is your assessment sensitive to the culture of families in general? It's not just black families that have culture, all families have culture. And is your assessment restricted by your understanding of resources and resource shortfalls? Service user involvement. This comes very much from Peter Beresford, professor in social work, who's also a long-term user of mental health services. And again, to skip over this at the speed of light, service user involvement becomes very, very important in social work education. There's a great danger of it being tokenistic. Peter Beresford and others like Susie Croft talk about being clear about the rationale for service user involvement. Is it just that kind of consumerist, tokenistic approach, or is it something more democratic, where participation actually has some meaning to service users, and so they can actually own their participation in social work education and social work organisations? The types of involvement for service users: is it just routine feedback? Is it self-advocacy? Is it providing forms of voice? Is it ensuring a continuous process and not just events that don't actually get mainstreamed into the organisation? People will be familiar, I'm sure, with the ladder of involvement. Symbolically, level 1 seems to have dropped off the bottom of the ladder there. That's actually an indication of my incompetence in PowerPoint. I couldn't get it to get on the first ladder, but it's symbolically important. What service users will tell you is generally speaking, is that where service user involvement is round about levels 2 or 3, so there's still a very long way to go in terms of building service user involvement into social work education and social work practice. But I think this is a useful analytical tool for evaluating our attempts at involving service users and others as well, obviously carers as well. I'm just going to, I've lost. My key bits disappeared. Never mind, I shall have to do this verbally. I don't know, it's on your thing, isn't it? It's Tony Benn?
Yeah.
I don't know how it got lost off the list. Oh, no, it is there. It's, yeah, can't go without Tony Benn. I was on my way to doing a very usefully and serendipitously, if that's a word, to go to do a equality and diversity training session for some social workers in Bristol, and I was listening to Radio 4, as I tend to do, and Tony Benn was on, and he was, I don't know what he was talking about because I came into the middle of it, but I suspect he was talking about politicians, but I think this is equally applicable to others as well. It certainly has made me think over the years. And he asked these, I think it's 6 questions. Who are you? What power do you have? Whom do you exercise it over? By what authority do you hold your power? And to whom are you accountable? And lastly, how do we get rid of you? And in as much as social workers should be always working towards making themselves redundant, certainly in this particular piece of work, I think that's extremely helpful. So I think these provide, unless we provide answers to these questions of power and legitimacy, then social work could continue to be allied with the social injustices that I talked about, rather than social justice. And just to go back to, and I think I can go back to, the one alternative is this Social Work and Social Justice Manifesto for a New Engaged Practice, which I don't think is on your, so I'll just leave it there for a moment and allow people to write that down. And this is a manifesto that you can sign up to if it's something that you agree with. So there are these opportunities beginning to be built into social work education and social work practice for resistance. But